So this is video 2 of creating the color wheel for the color theory section of the reference guide. We are in Illustrator, and so far we have created a single wedge that will be used to create our 12-point color wheel. So now we need to continue by joining our path that we have cut from our circle. We need to cut, and then we've cut the path, but now we need to join this corner, and this corner in order to join our singular paths together. Because right now we have 3 single paths, and the only way to fill a shape is to create a closed path. So if we do not join this corner and this corner and this corner to these 2 lines, what happens is when you create a fill color, so if I select my swatches and I try to fill it with color, you can see that it can only fill from one anchor point to the next. With a singular line, you won't even see the fill color. It will only show the outline stroke. So we need to be able to join these points together so that this color will fill, well, all the way down to here and back up the other side to completely fill this wedge. So one thing that we did was we locked these 2 lines onto the page so they didn't move while we cut our path to create the top of the wedge of the, from the circle. So what we're going to do is we now need to unlock those 2 lines. So unlock all under object. That has now released the 2 lines. You can see that there are anchor points here. And with our black arrow, if I select this line, it selects the path. Notice it's separate from this path, from this path. The arrow that we need to use, however, because the black arrow, the selection tool, selects the entire object. The white arrow is going to allow us, you can see the anchors are solid blue, which means they're both selected. We only want to select, if I click over here and click again, we only want to select one of them. So if I click on this path, this anchor point is solid blue, this one's white, which means this is the only one I can manipulate. So in order to grab 2 paths, 2 anchor points that are literally one on top of the other, how do I do that? I could zoom in as much as I want, but I might not be able to hold shift and click on 2 endpoints. So the easiest thing to do is actually to click outside of those 2 endpoints, like so, click and drag a selection with the white arrow over those 2 endpoints. Notice this anchor point remains white and this anchor point remains white. And if I click and drag, you can see I've selected both the anchor points from the top of the line segment as well as the right-hand side of the partial circle of the path that we cut. So with those selected, you right-click, and you'll get a menu here, and you can click to join those 2 corner points together, and watch what happens to my fill color. Okay, it disappears. Why did it disappear when I joined those together? Because this line segment is from the circle. We drew that first. So what Adobe Illustrator does is it's going to take the most foreground path, the last path you drew, and assume its color, which was no fill with a black stroke. And that's okay, because eventually we'll fill it with color. So now that we've joined those 2 points together, and we are now going to click and drag a selection down at the bottom, right click and click join. Now we have this anchor point and these 2 anchor points joined together. Now we have one more to go. Click and drag to select both anchor points at the same time, so you can right click, get the menu to join those together now. And now with my black arrow, I'm going to make sure the entire thing is selected. So I'm going to click on my path. There we go. Control 0 to zoom back out. And I now have a wedge. And if I click on my white arrow, so I have what's called a closed path now. Now when I move those anchor points using the white arrow, you can see they're connected. It is now a closed path. And if you remember from our first lesson when we were painstakingly tracing the star and the circle and the waves in our Illustrator practice session, we needed a closed path. We closed off the path in order to be able to fill it with color. So now that we have our finished wedge, we need 11 more wedges. And so we need the entire object selected, not just a single anchor point. So that's when we go back to the black arrow, the selection tool, to grab the entire object. So we're going back to where we started with the rotation tool. So if you click on the rotation tool, once again hovering directly over that center point, and it's now going to be called an anchor, we're going to hold the Alt key again to get the tail so that we can click and make a copy. We're not just going to rotate it 30 degrees. And notice it says 30 degrees because it pulled the last action that we did, which is perfect because we want the wedge to rotate at 30 degrees to create and fill the rest of our 360-degree circle. So we don't just want to move it, we want to copy it. You now have two. Now we could repeat that process 10 more times to fill our circle, or we have this amazing quick key combo that is only in Illustrator, which will duplicate the last action you performed. And the last action you performed was a copy of a rotation at 30 degrees. So in order to duplicate that action, Control D will duplicate that action. And you can repeat Control D, and just keep going until you fill your circle. And there, my friends, is your 12-point color wheel. I'll go back to my black arrow. And now I'm ready to fill it with color. So check out the next video to learn how to fill it with color and add our tints and shades.